much-needed alternative to conventional chemical toxins. Only one monoclonal antibody had ever been approved for cancer at the time. The drug rituximab, as we will see, had been developed by a startup biotechnology company in San Diego, IDEC Pharmaceuticals, and marketed by another biotechnology company located outside San Francisco, Genentech. Rituximab had overcome all the hurdles necessary to be approved by the Food and Drug Administration, FDA, in 1997, and it was to be used in the battle against a type of blood cancer known as a lymphoma. Early sales of the drug were promising but not overwhelming. The reason for the lag in sales was in part because monoclonal antibody drugs were not very familiar to most physicians, or even many scientists. However, this drug would go on to log peak annual revenues of more than $7.3 billion in 2015 alone and become the 12th highest-selling drug in history, undoubtedly fated to move even higher because antibody drug sales are not as susceptible to generic competition as more conventional medicines are. Looking back to 1998, the commercial view of monoclonal antibody therapeutics was not terribly optimistic. For one thing, the nascent field was considered, by many industry experts, to be unrealistic based on economics alone. Such views were justified based on the high costs needed to manufacture these large molecules, which might cost hundreds of dollars per dose, as compared with pennies for many conventional medicines. Moreover, key patents filed by early biotechnology pioneers meant a substantial portion of revenues, as much as 1/3 for some medicines, would have to be surrendered to competitors. To break even, some antibody drug companies contemplated asking prices of up to $10,000 for a single course of treatment, an outrageous proposition at the time. $10,000 today seems almost like a bargain when insurance companies are, with increasing frequency, asked to spend hundreds of thousands or even millions of dollars on some medicines. However, this price tag seemed utterly absurd to many in the late 1990s. Hence, many conventional pharmaceutical companies focused on standard medicines comprised of small and less complex molecules. Think of aspirin. In contrast, monoclonal antibodies were large and unwieldy beasts, that is, 1,000 times larger than aspirin. To manufacture a single antibody requires the precise arrangement of 4 large proteins, each situated in just the right way, to ensure an antibody drug is stable, safe, and efficacious. This complex construction could not be performed in the massive fermentation tanks used to manufacture small molecules, but instead required something with far greater sophistication, the honed skills of human or other mammalian cells. Yes, these cells actually served as the factories, and the technology needed to engineer the production of proteins in these tiny workshops had only been enabled in the 1970s and 1980s. All the antibody drugs described herein were produced by cells obtained from discarded human or animal tissues and then modified using genetic engineering to produce the antibody of interest. The high costs of growing the antibody-producing cells, purifying their protein products, and ensuring the resultant drug remained viable accounted for the bulk of the expense of monoclonal antibody drugs. These costs were compounded by an enormous amount of intellectual property, patents and royalties, that drastically increased the cost of manufacturing antibodies. Consequently, there were few biotechnology companies, or more accurately, investors, willing to take the plunge into such a risky enterprise. In my years as an academic, I spoke with representatives from many conventional pharmaceutical companies, and most indicated their unease with utilizing monoclonal antibodies for any indication, and certainly not for cancer. Cancer at the time was a relative